The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as Kate Middleton adjusted her pearl earrings one final time. She stood before the ornate mirror in her private chambers, her reflection showing a woman who had learned to wear grace like armor. Today would test that armor more than she knew. The family gathering had been planned for weeks. It was meant to be a simple lunch to discuss upcoming royal engagements, but Kate had sensed the tension building. The whispers in the corridors, the careful way staff members avoided eye contact, the unusual formality in Camilla's recent messages, all signs that something was brewing beneath the polished surface of royal life. Kate smoothed down her navy dress, a conservative choice that spoke of respect and dignity. She had learned early in her marriage to William that every choice mattered in this world. Every color, every cut, every accessory would be analyzed and interpreted. Today, she chose to project calm authority. As she walked down the corridor toward the private dining room, her heels clicked softly against the ancient stones. Portraits of long-dead royals watched her pass, their eyes seeming to judge whether she was worthy of joining their ranks. Kate had stopped feeling intimidated by these painted ancestors years ago. She had earned her place here through dedication, through surviving scandals and criticisms, through supporting William when the weight of his future crown felt too heavy. The dining room door stood slightly ajar, and Kate could hear voices inside. Charles's deep baritone carried clearly, though his words were muffled. There was something in his tone that made Kate pause, a sharpness she rarely heard when he spoke to family. She pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. The scene before her was one she would remember for the rest of her life. Charles sat at the head of the mahogany table, his face darker than a storm cloud. His usually impeccable composure had cracked, revealing the fury underneath. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Across from him, Camilla sat with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that seemed to mock the very air around it. William stood near the window, his back turned to the room, shoulders rigid with tension. The moment Kate entered, he turned, and she saw her husband's face was pale with barely controlled anger. "Kate," William said, his voice strained. "Please sit down." She moved to her usual chair beside William, nodding politely to Charles and Camilla. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady and warm despite the obvious tension. Camilla's smile widened as Kate sat down. It was the kind of smile a cat might wear while watching a mouse struggle in a trap. "Catherine," Camilla said, her voice honey-sweet, but with something poisonous underneath. "How lovely you look today. That dress is so very appropriate." The emphasis on appropriate hung in the air like smoke. Kate felt the implied criticism, but kept her expression neutral. Years of dealing with subtle royal politics had taught her to recognize these verbal daggers and how to deflect them without seeming confrontational. "Thank you," Kate replied simply, reaching for her water glass with steady hands. Charles cleared his throat roughly. "Now that we're all here," he began, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "perhaps we can address the matter at hand." Kate glanced at William, trying to understand what had happened before her arrival. Her husband's jaw was clenched so tightly she worried he might crack a tooth. "The matter," Charles continued, his eyes fixed on Camilla, "of certain comments that have been made to the press." Camilla's smile faltered for just a moment before returning stronger than before. "Charles, darling, I think you're being dramatic. I simply share my honest thoughts about the future of the monarchy. Surely that's not a crime." "Honest thoughts," William finally spoke, turning from the window. "You called Kate's background unfortunate and suggested she was unprepared for royal duties. You questioned whether our children were being raised with proper royal values." Kate felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't known about any press comments. The palace communications team usually shielded the family from the worst media attacks, but this sounded like something that had come from inside their own walls. "I was taken out of context," Camilla said, her tone suggesting she was the victim here. The journalist twisted my words. "I was simply expressing concern for the institution we all serve." "Concern?" Charles's voice rose slightly. You undermine my daughter-in-law to a national newspaper. You question the legitimacy of my grandchildren's upbringing. How was that serving the institution? Kate watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about recent comments. This was about years of subtle undermining, of small slights that had built up like sediment in a riverbed until they created an insurmountable barrier. She remembered the early years of her marriage when Camilla would make seemingly innocent comments about Kate's learning curve or her adjustment period. How Camilla would praise other royal wives while pointedly excluding Kate from the compliments. How she would suggest changes to Kate's schedule or wardrobe choices under the guise of helpful guidance. I think, Kate said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension, there may have been a misunderstanding. All eyes turned to her. Camilla's smile returned, as if Kate's words were proof of her innocence. However, Kate continued, her tone remaining gentle but gaining strength. I would appreciate knowing exactly what was said so I can understand how to address any concerns about my performance or my children's upbringing. It was a masterful response, acknowledging the possibility of misunderstanding while demanding accountability. Kate had learned this technique from years of dealing with hostile press conferences and difficult diplomatic situations. Camilla's smile flickered again. Catherine, you're being oversensitive. It was hardly worth mentioning. If it was hardly worth mentioning, William interjected, his voice cold. Then, why mention it at all? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Camilla looked around the table, perhaps realizing that her usual tactics weren't working today. Charles was too angry, William too protective, and Kate too composed. I simply feel, Camilla said, her tone becoming more defensive, that as the future queen consort, I have a responsibility to ensure standards are maintained. Kate is, well, she's lovely of course, but she didn't grow up in this world. Sometimes guidance is necessary. Kate felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't about recent press comments. This was about fundamental respect. Camilla was positioning herself as Kate's superior, despite Kate being married to the future king. Standards? Kate asked, her voice still calm, but with a new edge. Could you elaborate on which standards you feel I haven't met? It was a trap, and Kate knew it. If Camilla listed specific criticisms, she would seem petty and vindictive. If she backtracked, she would appear weak and dishonest. Camilla looked cornered for the first time since Kate had entered the room. Her smile was now tight and forced. I simply think that royal duties require a certain background, an understanding of protocol that comes from proper breeding. The words hung in the air like a slap. Kate felt William tense beside her, felt Charles's sharp intake of breath. But Kate herself remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. I see, Kate said softly. And you feel that my background, growing up in a loving middle-class family, attending university, working before marriage, somehow disqualifies me from serving the crown effectively? Camilla realized she had stepped too far, but she couldn't retreat now without losing face entirely. I simply think that some understanding of aristocratic traditions is helpful, like the tradition of loyalty to family. Kate asked, her voice still gentle, but the question sharp as a blade. Or the tradition of supporting the monarchy rather than undermining it. Charles leaned forward in his chair. That's quite enough, he said, his voice carrying royal authority. Camilla, your behavior is unacceptable. But Camilla wasn't finished. Perhaps sensing that this was her moment to either establish dominance or lose it forever, she straightened in her chair and let her mask slip completely. Charles, you're being unfair, she said, her voice losing its honey coating. I've supported this family for years. I've endured public criticism and private humiliation for the sake of this monarchy. I think I've earned the right to express my concerns when I see standards slipping. Standards slipping? William's voice was dangerously quiet. Kate has been nothing but exemplary in her duties. She's modernized the monarchy while respecting its traditions. She's raised our children with love and wisdom. She supported countless charities and represented Britain with dignity around the world. What more do you want? Camilla turned to William with a look that was almost pitying. William, dear, you're too close to see it clearly. Love can be blinding, but I can see what the public sees, someone who, despite her best efforts, simply wasn't born to this role. The silence that followed was deafening. Kate could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of generations of royal tradition pressing down on the room. Then Charles spoke, his voice low and deadly calm. That is enough. You will apologize to Catherine immediately. Camilla's face flushed red. I will not apologize for speaking the truth. Then you will leave this room, Charles said, rising to his feet. And you will not return until you're prepared to show proper respect to my daughter-in-law and the future Queen of England. The confrontation had reached its breaking point. Years of careful politeness had shattered, revealing the raw emotions underneath. Kate sat perfectly still in the eye of this hurricane, her composure intact even as her world shifted around her. Camilla looked around the table one more time, her smirk returning as she realized she was about to be dismissed. But there was something desperate in her eyes now, something that suggested she knew she had gone too far to come back from this easily. Very well, Camilla said, rising gracefully from her chair. I can see when I'm not welcome. She looked directly at Kate. But history will remember who truly belonged here and who was simply fortunate enough to marry into it. With that, she swept from the room, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Kate finally allowed herself to exhale slowly. Around the table, her family began to process what had just happened and what it might mean for the future of the monarchy itself. The battle lines had been drawn, and Kate knew that this was only the beginning. The heavy oak door closed behind Camilla with a soft click that seemed to echo through the dining room like thunder. Kate remained seated, her hands still folded in her lap, though she could feel them trembling slightly beneath the table. The shock of the confrontation was beginning to settle into her bones, but she refused to let it show. Charles sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 75 years. His face had gone from red with anger to gray with exhaustion. I'm deeply sorry, Catherine, he said, his voice hoarse. That behavior was inexcusable. William moved quickly to Kate's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from fire. How long has this been going on? He asked his father. How long has she been saying these things? Charles rubbed his temples with weathered hands. I've heard rumors. Staff members have mentioned comments. But I didn't realize the extent of it until yesterday, when a newspaper contacted the press office for comment on Camilla's interview. Kate looked up sharply. There's going to be a published interview? The editor called as a courtesy, Charles explained. Apparently, Camilla spoke quite freely about several topics, including the future of the monarchy and... He paused, struggling with the words, concerns about modernization efforts that might compromise traditional values. The implications hit Kate like a cold wave. This wasn't just a private family disagreement that could be smoothed over with time and careful diplomacy. This was about to become public knowledge, dissected by every newspaper and analyzed by every royal commentator in the country. What exactly did she say? Kate asked, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. William's hand tightened on her shoulder. Kate, you don't need to. Yes, I do. She interrupted gently but firmly. If I'm going to face the public reaction, I need to know what I'm facing. Charles reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. The newspaper faxed over the relevant quotes. I should warn you, Catherine, they're difficult to read. Kate held out her hand with quiet determination. After a moment's hesitation, Charles passed her the paper. As Kate read, her face remained perfectly composed, but William watched the subtle changes, the slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of her spine. When she finished, she carefully refolded the paper and set it on the table. Catherine means well, but royal duties require more than good intentions, Kate quoted softly from memory. The children need to understand their place in the hierarchy of nobility, not grow up thinking they're ordinary children who happen to have titles. Some traditions exist for important reasons, and we must be careful not to let enthusiasm for modernization override centuries of wisdom. William swore under his breath. She made it sound like you're some kind of revolutionary trying to destroy the monarchy from within. But she was clever about it, Kate observed, her analytical mind taking over from her emotional reaction. She never said anything directly insulting. She positioned herself as the concerned guardian of tradition, worried about well-meaning but misguided changes. Charles looked at his daughter-in-law with new respect. You understand the game she's playing. I've been playing it for over a decade, Kate replied. I just never realized I was playing against her. The truth was more complicated than that, and Kate knew it. She had sensed Camilla's subtle resistance for years, but had chosen to interpret it charitably. The small corrections, the pointed suggestions, the way Camilla would praise other royal women while finding gentle criticisms for Kate's approach. She had tried to see it as helpful guidance from a more experienced family member. Now she realized how naive that had been. The timing is particularly damaging, Charles said heavily. The interview will be published next week, just before the children's school charity gala that Catherine organized. Kate's heart sank. The gala was something she had worked on for months. It was meant to showcase how the monarchy could support education while staying relevant to modern families. She had personally visited dozens of schools, worked with teachers and administrators, and created partnerships with educational charities. The event was supposed to demonstrate exactly the kind of modernization efforts that Camilla was now publicly questioning. She knew about the gala, Kate said quietly. She knew the timing would make it look like I was pushing ahead despite concerns from senior family members. William began pacing again, his anger reigniting. This is sabotage, pure and simple. William, Kate said softly, and something in her tone made him stop and look at her. Sit down, please. He hesitated, then took the chair beside her. Kate reached over and took his hand. I understand you're angry, she said. I understand you want to protect me. But we need to think strategically about how to handle this. Kate, she attacked you publicly. She questioned your fitness to be queen, your ability to raise our children properly. How can you be so calm about this? Kate was quiet for a long moment, organizing her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was clear and determined. Because losing my composure won't help anyone. Because our children will see how we handle this crisis, and I want them to learn that dignity and strength aren't the same as loudness and anger. And because she paused, looking between William and Charles, because Camilla just made a very serious mistake. Charles raised an eyebrow. How do you mean? She overplayed her hand, Kate explained. For years, she could hide behind the appearance of being helpful, of offering guidance. But this interview strips away that pretense. She's positioned herself as opposing the future king and queen's vision for the monarchy. That's not a sustainable position. William squeezed her hand. What are you thinking? Kate stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ancient grounds of Windsor Castle. I'm thinking about Queen Victoria, she said, about how she faced criticism for changing royal traditions, about how she was attacked for being too emotional, too modern, too different from what people expected. And Charles prompted. Kate turned back to face them, and she's remembered as one of England's greatest monarchs because she stayed true to her principles while adapting the monarchy for her times. The people who criticized her are footnotes in history books. The room fell silent as the men absorbed her words. Kate could see understanding dawning in their faces. You're right, Charles said slowly. This interview will be seen as an attack on the future of the monarchy itself, not just on you personally. Exactly. And when the public sees our charity gala next week, sees the enthusiasm of the children, the positive response from educators, the genuine impact we're making, they'll understand what's really at stake here. William stood up and moved to stand beside his wife at the window. So what do we do? How do we respond? Kate smiled for the first time since entering the room. We don't respond. We demonstrate. I don't understand, Charles said. We let our work speak for itself. We proceed with the gala exactly as planned. We show the public what modern monarchy looks like, not through words, but through actions. And we trust the British people to recognize the difference between someone trying to tear down tradition and someone trying to honor it while making it relevant for the future. Charles nodded slowly. It's risky. If the public reaction to the interview is negative enough, then we'll deal with that when it happens, Kate said firmly. But I refuse to let fear of criticism change how we serve the people. That's exactly what Camilla is hoping for, that we'll become so worried about appearing too modern that we'll retreat back into the old ways of doing things. William wrapped his arm around his wife's waist. I love you, he said simply. Your strength, your wisdom, your grace under pressure. Camilla was wrong about everything, but she was especially wrong about you not being born for this role. You're exactly what this monarchy needs. Kate leaned into her husband's embrace, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. I won't pretend this doesn't hurt, she said quietly. I've tried so hard to be a good daughter-in-law, to show respect for tradition while bringing my own perspective. To have that characterized as inadequacy, it's painful. Your response today proved her wrong, Charles said, standing and moving toward them. The way you handled yourself, the way you thought strategically instead of reactively, that's exactly the kind of leadership this family needs. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Come in, Charles called. One of his private secretaries entered, looking apologetic. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there's been a development with the newspaper situation. Kate felt her stomach clench. What kind of development? The editor has requested an additional comment from the palace. Apparently, they've received some supplementary material that they're considering adding to the article. Charles's face darkened. What kind of supplementary material? The secretary looked uncomfortable. Photos, sir, of the Queen Consort and some friends at a private gathering. The photos themselves are harmless, but the accompanying audio. Audio, William demanded. Someone recorded the conversation. There are additional comments about the Duchess of Cambridge that are significantly more direct than what appeared in the original interview. Kate closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. How much more direct? I'm afraid I haven't heard the full content yet, ma'am. But the editor described them as impossible to interpret as anything other than hostile. The room fell silent again. Kate realized that this was the moment when everything would change, not just for her, but for the entire family. Camilla had clearly been more careless than any of them realized. I need to hear exactly what was said, Kate said finally. All of it. Kate. William started to protest. No, she said firmly. I need to know what we're dealing with. I need to understand exactly how far this has gone so we can respond appropriately. Charles nodded to his secretary. Arrange for us to hear the recording. And contact our legal team. I want to know our options. As the secretary left to make arrangements, Kate returned to her chair at the table. She felt oddly calm now, as if the worst uncertainty was over and she could finally see the full scope of the challenge ahead. Whatever is on that recording, she said to William and Charles, we'll face it together, as a family, and we'll come through it stronger than before. But even as she spoke the words, Kate wondered if she truly believed them, or if she was simply trying to convince herself that her composure would be enough to weather whatever storm was coming. The recording device sat in the center of the mahogany table like an unexploded bomb. Kate stared at it, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her wedding ring was cutting into her finger. Beside her, William's breathing had grown shallow and quick. Charles looked older than she had ever seen him, as if the weight of his crown had suddenly doubled. Before we begin, Charles said to his private secretary, I want absolute discretion about what we're about to hear. This information does not leave this room under any circumstances. Of course, Your Majesty, the secretary replied, then looked at Kate with genuine sympathy. Your Royal Highness, are you certain you wish to hear this? I could provide you with a summary instead. Kate appreciated his kindness, but she shook her head. I need to hear her exact words. I need to understand the tone, the context, everything. William reached over and took her hand. We can stop the recording at any time, he said softly. Kate nodded and straightened her shoulders. Please proceed. The secretary pressed play, and suddenly Camilla's voice filled the room, bright and animated in a way that made the upcoming betrayal even more shocking. Oh, darling, you should see her at family gatherings, Camilla's recorded voice laughed. Catherine always looks so terribly serious, as if she's taking notes for an exam. She still acts like she's afraid someone's going to ask her to leave. Kate felt the words hit her like physical blows. The casual cruelty in Camilla's tone, the way she was clearly entertaining her friends at Kate's expense, was more painful than any formal criticism could have been. But surely she's improved over the years, came another woman's voice, one Kate didn't recognize. Oh, she tries, bless her heart, Camilla continued. But you can see William getting frustrated sometimes. He'll suggest something, and she'll have this deer-in-headlights look like she's completely out of her depth. The children sense it too, of course. They're polite to her, but you can tell they know something's off. Kate's breath caught. The suggestion that her own children somehow sensed her inadequacy was a cruelty beyond anything she had imagined Camilla capable of. William started to reach for the device to stop it, but Kate caught his wrist. No, she whispered. I need to hear all of it. The real problem, Camilla's voice went on, is that she doesn't understand her place. She thinks because she married the future king, she can reshape everything to suit her middle-class sensibilities. But you can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear, can you? The old phrase hung in the air like a curse. Kate had heard it before, whispered by critics who thought she wasn't listening, but to hear it from Camilla, someone who should have been protecting the family's unity, was devastating. What about Charles? Asked a third voice. Surely he must see it. There was a pause, and then Camilla's voice turned more serious. Charles is torn, of course. He wants to support William, but he also understands the importance of maintaining standards. We've discussed it privately, and while he would never say so publicly, I think he sometimes wonders if William's judgment was compromised by his feelings. Kate felt the room spinning around her. The implication was clear, that Charles himself doubted William's choice of bride, that her father-in-law had been discussing her inadequacies with Camilla behind closed doors. Catherine means well, Camilla continued, but meaning well isn't enough when you're representing 1,000 years of history. The monarchy survived by maintaining certain standards, certain boundaries. You can't just open the doors to anyone who seems nice and hope for the best. So what happens next? Asked the first voice. Camilla's laugh was soft and knowing. Well, let's just say that time has a way of revealing people's true natures. William is already showing signs of strain. Anyone with eyes can see it. And the children are getting older, more aware. Eventually, even love has its limits. The recording ended with the soft click of the device being turned off. The silence that followed was deafening. Kate sat perfectly still, her face a mask of composure that hid the devastation raging inside her. She felt as if everything she had worked for, everything she believed about her place in this family, had been systematically destroyed in the space of a few minutes. Charles was the first to speak, his voice shaking with fury. I have never, ever discussed you negatively with Camilla or anyone else. The suggestion that I questioned William's judgment or your fitness for this family is an absolute lie. Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. These comments go far beyond personal criticism, William said, his voice deadly quiet. She's suggesting that our marriage is failing, that our children don't respect their mother, that Kate is somehow unfit to be queen. These aren't just cruel observations. They're lies designed to damage the monarchy itself. The secretary cleared his throat nervously. There's more, Your Majesty. The newspaper has additional recordings from the same gathering. Should I? No, Kate said suddenly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. No more. She stood up abruptly and walked to the window again, her back to the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. When Kate finally turned around, Her face was transformed. The hurt was still there, but it had been joined by something else, a steely determination that hadn't been there before. "I need to ask you both something," she said, looking directly at Charles and William. "And I need completely honest answers." "Anything," William said immediately. "Do you believe what she said? Any of it? Do you think I'm out of my depth? Do you think the children sense some inadequacy in me? Do you think I don't understand my place?" Charles stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the stone floor. "Catherine, that recording was a vicious character assassination with no basis in reality. You are one of the finest people I have ever known, and you have exceeded every expectation anyone could have had for a daughter-in-law." "William," Kate asked. Her husband crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Kate, you are the strongest, most graceful, most intelligent woman I have ever met. You make me a better man and a better future king. Our children adore you, and they should. You're an extraordinary mother." What Camilla said wasn't just wrong, it was deliberately malicious. Kate searched their faces for any hint of doubt, any suggestion that Camilla's words had contained even a grain of truth. She found none. "Then we have a choice," she said finally. "We can let these lies define the narrative, or we can show the world who we really are." "What are you proposing?" Charles asked. Kate moved back to the table and sat down. "The charity gala is in 5 days. By then, both the original interview and these recordings will be public knowledge. The media will be watching to see how we respond, whether we retreat or advance." "And," William prompted. "We advance," Kate said firmly. "We not only proceed with the gala exactly as planned, we make it bigger. We invite more schools, more families, more children. We show the public what a modern monarchy looks like when it's working properly." Charles frowned. "That's an enormous risk, Catherine. If the public reaction to the recordings is negative, you'll be walking into a hostile environment." "Maybe," Kate agreed. "But the alternative is to hide, to let these lies go unchallenged. And I won't do that. I won't give Camilla the satisfaction of thinking she's driven me away from my duties." William was quiet for a moment, then slowly smiled. "You want to use the gala as a response without actually responding." "Exactly. Let our work speak for itself. Let the public see us with real families, real children, making a real difference. And let them judge for themselves whether that looks like someone who doesn't understand their place in the monarchy." "It's brilliant," Charles said slowly. "But it's also dangerous. If anything goes wrong, if there's any negative reaction from the crowd, then we'll handle it with dignity," Kate said. "But I believe in the British people. I believe they can see through malicious gossip to the truth." The secretary, who had been quietly listening, cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Royal Highness, there might be another consideration. My sources at the newspaper suggest that the recordings have made some of the editorial staff uncomfortable. Apparently, the tone was more vicious than they expected." Kate felt a flicker of hope. "What does that mean?" "It means that public reaction might not be as negative as we fear. Many people will see these comments for what they are, cruel gossip rather than legitimate criticism." William nodded. "And if we respond with grace and professionalism while Camilla looks petty and vindictive, the contrast will speak for itself," Kate finished. Charles walked around the table and placed a gentle hand on Kate's shoulder. "I want you to know that whatever happens in the coming days, you have my complete support. You are my daughter-in-law in every sense that matters, and I am proud to have you in this family." Kate felt tears threatening for the first time since the recording had started, but she blinked them away. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "What about Camilla?" William asked. "She can't just continue as if nothing has happened." Charles's face hardened. "Camilla will face consequences for her actions. But our priority right now is protecting this family and the monarchy itself. We deal with internal matters privately and present a united front to the public." Kate nodded. "Agreed. But I do have one request." "Name it," Charles said. "I want to personally review every aspect of the gala. Every speech, every activity, every detail. If we're going to use this event to show who we really are, I want it to be perfect. Done, William said immediately. What do you need from us? Kate stood up and smoothed down her dress. For the first time in hours, she felt truly calm. The storm was coming, but she was ready for it. I need you to trust me, she said. I need you to believe that the woman you married can handle whatever comes next. And I need you to remember that sometimes the best response to cruelty is simply to be better than the people trying to hurt you. As they prepared to leave the dining room and face whatever challenges awaited, Kate realized something had fundamentally changed. The naive woman who had entered this room hoping for understanding and reconciliation was gone. In her place stood someone harder, wiser, and ultimately stronger, someone ready to fight for her family and her future with every tool at her disposal. The real battle was just beginning. The morning of the charity gala dawned gray and drizzly, as if the weather itself was reflecting the tension that had consumed the royal family for the past week. Kate stood in her dressing room at Kensington Palace, staring at her reflection while her stylist made final adjustments to her dress, a stunning midnight blue that had been chosen specifically to convey both elegance and accessibility. The past 5 days have been a whirlwind of media storms and carefully orchestrated public relations. The newspaper had published both Camilla's original interview and excerpts from the recordings, creating exactly the public debate that Kate had predicted. The reactions had been mixed. Some commentators had defended Camilla's right to express concerns about royal protocol, while others had condemned what they saw as an unseemly attack on the future queen. But Kate had been right about one thing. The public had seen through the veneer of legitimate criticism to the personal malice underneath. Social media had exploded with support for Kate, with thousands of people sharing stories about her charitable work, her dedication to her children, and her graceful handling of years of intense scrutiny. Still, Kate knew that tonight would be the real test. Every camera would be watching for signs of strain. Every reporter will be looking for evidence that Camilla's words had found their mark. The slightest stumble, the smallest sign of uncertainty, would be magnified into proof that she was indeed the unsuitable outsider that Camilla had portrayed. "You look beautiful, ma'am," her stylist said softly. Strong and regal. Kate smiled genuinely for the first time all week. "Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping for." A soft knock at the door announced William's arrival. He entered wearing his formal military dress uniform, looking every inch the future king. But Kate could see the worry lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that spoke of 5 sleepless nights. "Ready?" he asked, though his tone suggested he was hoping she might say no. "More than ready," Kate replied, surprising him with her confidence. They made their way downstairs where Charles was waiting in the drawing room. The relationship between father and son had been strained all week. Charles had been privately furious with Camilla, but he was also struggling with the public nature of the family conflict. The monarchy had always dealt with internal disputes behind closed doors, and having their private disagreements splashed across newspaper front pages felt like a fundamental violation of everything he had been taught about royal dignity. "The car is ready," Charles said, his tone carefully neutral. "The security team reports that crowd control is manageable." Kate raised an eyebrow. "Manageable how?" "There are protesters," Charles admitted reluctantly. "Not many, but some. Signs supporting you. Signs supporting Camilla. Signs calling for modernization. Signs defending tradition. The usual mixture when the royal family becomes a public debate." Kate nodded calmly. "I expected that. In a way, it's better to have the conversation out in the open rather than hiding behind polite facades." William and Charles exchanged glances. Kate's composure over the past week had been remarkable, but they worried that she was suppressing emotions that would eventually demand release. The ride to the venue was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Kate watched London pass by outside the window and found herself thinking about the little girl who had dreamed of fairy tales, never imagining that real princess stories could be so complicated and painful. When they arrived at the venue, Kate could see immediately that the evening was going to be more challenging than anticipated. The usual crowd of well-wishers was there, but so were journalists with cameras and protesters with signs. The atmosphere felt charged, electric, with the kind of energy that could turn either celebratory or hostile in an instant. "Remember," William murmured as they prepared to exit the car, "we're here for the children. Whatever happens, we focus on them." Kate squeezed his hand. "I know. Trust me." They stepped out of the car to a cacophony of voices. Cheers and boos mixed together, creating a wall of sound that was both overwhelming and oddly energizing. Kate kept her smile steady and her pace measured as they walked toward the entrance, stopping occasionally to speak with children and families who had come to support the charity. It was at one of these stops that the first real test came. A young mother approached with her daughter, a girl of about 8 who was clutching a handmade card. "Your Royal Highness," the mother said, her voice nervous but determined. "My daughter wanted to give you this. She made it after she heard people were saying mean things about you." Kate knelt down to the little girl's level, ignoring the flashing cameras around them. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," the girl whispered, then held out her card. "I drew you as a queen because you're nice to children." Kate opened the card to reveal a crayon drawing of a figure in a crown surrounded by smiling children. The words "Best Queen Ever" were written in careful 8-year-old handwriting across the top. For a moment, Kate felt her composure waver. After a week of cruel words and calculated attacks, this simple gesture of support from a child hit her harder than any professional accolade could have. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," Kate said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much, Emma. You made my whole day." She stood up and found herself looking directly into the cameras that had captured the entire exchange. Instead of feeling exposed, she felt strengthened. This was what mattered. Not the political games and personal vendettas, but the real impact they could have on real people's lives. Inside the venue, the charity gala was in full swing. Hundreds of children from schools across London were participating in educational activities, meeting authors and scientists, and engaging with interactive exhibits that Kate had spent months planning. She moved through the crowd with genuine joy, her earlier nervousness replaced by the energizing feeling of being exactly where she belonged. She read stories to groups of fascinated children, helped with science experiments, and listened intently as young students explained their academic projects. It was during one of these conversations, Kate was discussing environmental conservation with a group of teenagers, that she became aware of a commotion near the entrance. Turning, she saw Camilla entering the venue with her own small entourage. Kate felt her heart rate spike. Camilla's presence hadn't been planned or announced. This was clearly a strategic move, designed to create exactly the kind of public confrontation that would dominate tomorrow's headlines. Across the room, their eyes met. Camilla's smile was as sharp as ever, but there was something desperate in her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. The backlash from the recordings had been more severe than she had anticipated, and Kate realized that this surprise appearance was an attempt to regain control of the narrative. Kate excused herself politely from the teenagers and began walking across the room toward Camilla. The crowd seemed to sense the significance of the moment. Conversations quieted, cameras turned, and everyone waited to see what would happen when the two women came face to face. William appeared at Kate's side, his face tense with concern. "Kate, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said softly. "This ends tonight." They met in the center of the room, surrounded by hundreds of onlookers, but somehow feeling completely alone. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then, Kate smiled, not the sharp, defensive expression that Camilla wore, but a genuine, radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "Camilla," she said warmly, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed space. "How wonderful that you could join us. These children and families are doing such important work in their communities. I know you'll be inspired by their dedication." It was a masterful response, gracious, welcoming, and completely focused on the event's purpose rather than their personal conflict. Camilla had clearly prepared for confrontation, but Kate's grace left her with no target to attack. "Catherine," Camilla replied, her smile faltering slightly. "Yes, it's lovely to see the children so engaged. Would you like me to introduce you to some of them?" Kate asked. "There's a group from South London who have created the most amazing community garden project. I think you'd find their environmental work particularly interesting." Again, Kate had turned what could have been a moment of tension into an opportunity to highlight the charity's work. Camilla found herself being led toward a group of excited 10-year-olds before she could formulate any kind of dramatic response. For the next hour, Kate maintained this strategy. Every interaction with Camilla became an opportunity to showcase the gala's mission. Every potential moment of conflict was deflected by Kate's relentless focus on the children and families they were there to support. The effect was remarkable. The crowd, initially tense and expectant, gradually relaxed as they realized they were witnessing not a royal confrontation, but a celebration of charitable work and community engagement. The children, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around them, responded to both women with the same enthusiasm they showed for every adult who took interest in their projects. As the evening progressed, Camilla began to look increasingly uncomfortable. Her dramatic entrance had been neutralized by Kate's grace, and every attempt to create tension was met with warm professionalism and genuine enthusiasm for the charity's work. The turning point came during Kate's closing speech. She stood before the assembled crowd, families, children, supporters, media, and, yes, Camilla, and spoke from the heart about the evening's true meaning. "Tonight," she began, her voice clear and strong, "we've seen something beautiful. We've seen children from different backgrounds, different schools, different circumstances come together to learn and share and support one another. We've seen families who believe in the power of education to transform lives. We've seen teachers and charity workers who dedicate themselves to making sure every child has the opportunity to reach their potential." She paused, her eyes finding the faces of children throughout the crowd. This is what the monarchy should be about. Not the personalities or the politics, but the service. Not the personal conflicts or the private disagreements, but the public good. We are here to support, to encourage, to celebrate the best of what this country can be. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I've spent over a decade in this role, learning and growing and sometimes making mistakes. I have been blessed with incredible support from my family, from the British people, and from dedicated professionals who share our vision of what royal service can accomplish." She looked directly at Camilla as she spoke the next words. "I have also learned that criticism comes with this territory. Sometimes that criticism is fair and helps us improve. Sometimes it is not. But what matters is not the criticism itself, but how we respond to it. Do we let it diminish our commitment to the people we serve? Do we let personal conflicts overshadow public duties? Do we retreat from our responsibilities, or do we recommit to them?" The room was completely silent now, everyone understanding that they were witnessing something significant. "Tonight, I recommit," Kate said, her voice ringing with conviction. "I recommit to serving these children, these families, this country, with every skill and every passion I possess. I recommit to supporting my husband as he prepares for his future role. I recommit to raising our children to understand both the privilege and the responsibility of their positions. And I recommit to working with anyone who shares our vision of a monarchy that serves the people rather than itself." The applause that followed was thunderous. But, more importantly, Kate could see in the faces around her that her message had landed exactly as intended. She had acknowledged the controversy without being defensive about it. She had demonstrated strength without attacking anyone. She had shown exactly the kind of leadership that the monarchy needed. As the crowd began to disperse, Camilla approached Kate one final time. Her earlier smugness had been replaced by something that might have been respect. "That was well done," she said quietly. Kate looked at her steadily. "We don't have to be enemies, Camilla. We can choose to be allies instead." Camilla was quiet for a long moment. I may have misjudged some things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. Kate nodded graciously. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward from here. Later, as Kate and William rode home through the London night, they finally allowed themselves to exhale. The week of tension, the months of careful planning, the years of preparation had all led to this moment of triumph. You were extraordinary tonight, William said, taking her hand. I have never been more proud of you. Kate leaned against his shoulder, finally, allowing her composure to soften into something more vulnerable. I realized something tonight, she said quietly. Camilla was wrong about almost everything, but she was right about one thing. I wasn't born to this role. I had to become worthy of it. And that journey, difficult as it's been, has made me stronger than I would have been otherwise. William kissed the top of her head. You've always been worthy of it, Kate. You just learned to see that yourself. As their car pulled through the gates of Kensington Palace, Kate looked up at the building that had become her home, thinking about the little girl with the crayon drawing, about the teenagers passionate about environmental conservation, about the families who had cheered when she spoke about commitment and service. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new criticisms, new tests of her resolve. But tonight, she had proven to the public, to her family, and most importantly to herself, that she was exactly where she belonged. Her composure had carried her through the storm, and she had emerged not just intact, but transformed. The uncertain young woman who had married into the royal family was gone, replaced by someone ready to be queen not just in title, but in every way that truly mattered. The future stretched ahead, full of unknown challenges and unexpected joys. But Kate faced it with confidence, knowing that she had found her voice, claimed her place, and proven that sometimes keeping your composure is the most powerful form of strength there is.